Welcome back to the AI Daily Brief Headlines Edition, all the daily AI news you need in around 5 minutes. Well, it appears that Amazon is fumbling their deployment of Anthropic's AI models. Last year, you might remember the company invested about $8 billion into a partnership with Anthropic to provide their models through AWS Bedrock infrastructure. The information, however, reports that the service leaves a lot to be desired, writing, "Customers who have used Bedrock say its API puts arbitrary limits on how much they can use Anthropic's models and lacks features they want." Now, AWS claims that usage limits are common in the industry, but the issues imply that they either don't have enough server capacity or are reserving too much for certain large customers. Sources familiar with the internal conversation told the information that some senior executives are referring to the situation as a disaster. A consulting firm executive said that AWS is at risk of losing its standing with startups over the issue. Several customers told the information, in fact, that problems with Bedrock are so bad that they've reverted to using Anthropic's own APIs to get reliable access to the models. An Amazon spokesperson pushed back on the story, claiming that AWS has tens of thousands of customers using Anthropic's models through Bedrock, and that the service is seeing unprecedented demand. They also defended the practice of rate limiting, stating that AWS uses them to ensure fair access. They shared a statement that said, "The information's suggestion that rate limits are a response to capacity constraints or that Amazon Bedrock is not equipped to support customers' needs is false." However, none of those comments really strike at the heart of the issue, which is that AWS risks losing startup customers if they can't offer reliable service. The AI coding companies in particular are some of the fastest scalers in recent memory, so losing them at this early stage could be a disaster. Sources said that AWS leaders recently discussed concerns that Lovable would defect from Bedrock due to its inability to keep up with fast-growing demand. Lovable CEO Anton Osika confirmed the company is now using Anthropic's direct API, commenting, "I know that we want to get the best possible terms and we need the most recent features, and the most recent features comes to Anthropic first." Anton declined to comment on whether the company is still using Bedrock, though AWS employees insisted that Lovable is still an active and growing customer. Over the past few months, the issues have reportedly been getting worse. During one incident in April, AWS was rate limited to 5 requests per minute. Anthropic's native API, on the other hand, was still handling 50 requests per minute. Another problem has been the delay to implement new features. Anthropic introduced prompt caching in December, which allows repeated prompts to return an automatic response without being processed by the model. That feature wasn't implemented into Bedrock, however, until earlier this month. If there are any takeaways, it's that AI cloud is still very much up for grabs. One of Amazon's suggested solutions to rate limits is a service called Provision Throughput, which charges per hour for inference time rather than per token. Consultants, however, said that startups find it difficult to forecast how much usage they need and have a much easier time with per token pricing. Is this all great for Google? Time will tell, but it's certainly not great for Amazon. Now, speaking of Google, they are also in the news for reasons they probably don't want to be. According to DOJ prosecutors in their ongoing antitrust case, Google paid Samsung a, quote, enormous sum of money to pre-install the Gemini app on their phone and other devices. The contract provided fixed monthly payment for each device and was set to run for 2 years. Samsung would also receive a cut of ad revenue from advertisements displayed in the app. Prosecutors called this the monopolist playbook at work. That said, this type of paid-for pre-installs are a pretty common practice in tech. And yet, this is always an area where antitrust regulators have a big issue. Microsoft famously suffered one of the largest antitrust penalties in modern history after pre-installing Internet Explorer for Windows in the late 90s. Google themselves received the largest European antitrust fine in history over pre-installs of Chrome on Android devices. 7 years on, the company is still appealing the $4.9 billion fine. What's interesting to me about this is that it seems pretty clear that AI and AI positioning is getting swept up into these ongoing antitrust suits that started before AI. These things really could have impact on how the industry shakes out. Interestingly, Google's upstart search rival Perplexity has been asked to testify in the remedy phase of the DOJ's antitrust case against Google, and actually arguing that they don't want Google to be broken up. Perplexity CEO Aravind Srinivas said that he intends to testify that Chrome should remain within and continue to be run by Google, but that Android should become more open to consumer choice. They said, "We don't believe anyone else can run a browser at that scale without a hit on quality, nor the business model to be able to serve that many users profitably by keeping the browser free." At the same time, however, he took issue with Android. He said that the way that Android's set up, products like Perplexity's AI assistant have a hard time competing. In any case, all of these antitrust questions are clearly coming home to roost for AI and will impact how the industry evolves. Lastly today, ChatGPT search appears to be growing at a rapid clip in Europe. In their latest update on EU usage, OpenAI disclosed that monthly active users have grown to 41.3 million as of the end of March. That's almost 4 times more than the 11.2 million they reported at the end of October. These numbers are part of mandatory reporting under the EU Digital Services Act. so we don't have any insight into growth in other regions. Now, for a comparison, Google Search has an estimated 332 million monthly active users, at least as of 2023, which implies that ChatGPT search is already in the ballpark of 8% market share if it were included in standard search engine statistics. The math is a little bit fuzzy, but Bing and Yandex, the closest competitors to Google Search, each command less than 4.5% of the market. And indeed, looking around the recent takes on AI search, it does feel like we've hit an inflection point. In a recent blog post, Simon Wilson wrote about how LLMs recently crossed the threshold where they're now reliable enough to trust for low-stakes research. He commented, "Why visit websites if you can get your answers directly from the chatbot instead? I can feel my usage of Google Search taking a nosedive already." He also added that this isn't all necessarily exclusively positive, saying, "I expect a bumpy ride as a new economic model for the web lurches into view." So friends, interesting things happening in the world of AI, but that's going to do it for today's AI Daily Brief Headlines edition. Next up, the main episode.